If you look back at the early years of the PlayStation, you can tell that the console needed to have a mascot. Its own Mario, its own Sonic, its own character to be the face of the console. And thanks to Naughty Dog, we of course saw the premiere of Crash effing Bandicoot. Until Spyro sort of came and took the throne, Crash was the mascot and the platformer to have for the system. And thanks to becoming the face of the PlayStation, we got quite a notable trilogy of platformers that I'm going to talk about here today. So let's get this started with the original Crash Bandicoot. The story begins with evil scientist Dr. Neo Cortex and his partner Nitrous Brio attempting to mutate the Bandicoot we know as Crash to go along with their army of superhuman animals. Something problematic happens during the experiment though, and Crash tries to escape, and succeeds by jumping out of the window of Cortex's castle and somehow teleports 2 islands away. So I think it's safe to assume that Bandicoots probably aren't the smartest critters out there, but you know what? That probably makes them the prime candidates for a mutated animal army. Good thinking. But no Crash? No problem. Cortex conveniently has his girlfriend Tawna to use instead, who has a shockingly creepy hourglass figure. Woof. But getting her back to safety and taking down Cortex is your prime objective, and the only way you know this is by either reading the instruction manual or leaving the game on the title screen for a few seconds. This doesn't play when you select New Game. So like many other platformers, the story doesn't mean a damn thing, so let's move on. Now Crash is a linear 3D platformer in the most direct sense. You go from point A to point B of course, but each level is a literal straight line, which does eliminate the exploration you'd expect from a 3D platformer, but given the end result that we got, it actually works out pretty fine. Levels will sometimes put you into 2D sections as well to make the game feel even more retro, which is a nice touch. As Crash, you only have 2 moves in your arsenal with the jump and your infamous spin attack, and you use both to either take down the enemies or break down the endless amounts of crates throughout the game. These crates are literally everywhere throughout the levels, and they contain items like Wumpa Fruit, which are this game's coins, 1-ups, sometimes nothing at all, and some of them are TNT crates that will explode a few seconds after hitting them. You'll also stumble upon the Mask of Witch Doctor Aku Aku, which will give you extra hit points and temporary invincibility upon getting a third one. If you have no ominous mask floating around you whatsoever though, it's one-hit death, and you will see that death screen a whole lot. As you'd expect, there are a lot of typical platforming elements in the main levels. There's a lot of jumping from one platform to the other before it disappears, traps that'll get in your way, and enemies you bounce on for a higher boost. But aside from the normal levels, there are 2 others. There are levels where you're being chased by a huge boulder, and levels where you're riding a hog at non-stop speeds. Both of which are totally awesome, and any Crash fan knows that both of these types became staples in the series, and rightfully deserved. Well, in the trilogy at least. There's a decent amount of variety in the entirety of levels too. Climbing fortresses, crossing over long rivers, venturing over a mystical bridge in the sky, it all makes for nice changes of pace. Although unfortunately it can get tedious because level themes repeat very often, and nothing really changes when you see a theme again. This happens throughout the entire trilogy, but not as much as this one. It's not a huge problem because again what you're doing is really solid and fun, but it's worth noting. The bosses really aren't anything too special either, which isn't too surprising, but it is kinda cool that some of the ones you do fight are the mutated animals that were successful in the experiments. And at least the final boss is pretty epic, fighting Cortex with his whole fortress engulfed in flames behind him. So the boss fights could have been a whole lot worse. Now before I talk about the few negatives I have, let's start with the positives. As I mentioned before, the platforming itself is really fun, and it's always satisfying to bounce on enemies. I also really do like the different themes used throughout. Similar to Donkey Kong Country, you start off in nature environments like forests, rivers, old ruins, etc., and make your way to the big scary castle at the end. The music also helps with the atmosphere, giving tunes that won't really stick in your head per se, aside from the main theme and hog levels, but they do get the job done, and that's what they're supposed to do. But unfortunately, I do have some negatives here. Firstly, controlling Crash can just feel stiff at times. It's hard to explain character control in a video, but trust me, it can sometimes just be a struggle trying to get Crash where you want to go. It doesn't help that you're restricted to the D-pad and you can't use the analog sticks. And also, the way the game asks you to get 100% is ridiculous. Levels themselves can be sorta cheap at times, but you get handfuls of lives, so it's manageable. But to get 100%, you need to get all the levels' gems, some of which are colored and open paths in previous levels. And to get the gems, you need to not only break every crate in the level, which would be fine enough on its own, but you need to do so without dying. Now you will die a lot in this game, so it is a complete pain in the ass to perfect the entire thing. The only thing I need to say is slippery climb. Crash fans already know the pain and torture this level has provided. It is one of the hardest levels in any platformer I've ever played, and that's not really a good thing, considering how stupid this level is. My last complaint is the completely idiotic save system. I understand that it was probably hard to implement a legit save system in the early years of the PlayStation, and luckily there are passwords, but man, trying to save your game couldn't be done any worse. You do so by either getting a gem, which again can be a pain at times, or finding a level's 3 character tokens and beating a bonus room. These are little extra 2D challenge rooms that offer up a lot of lives, but the only ones that are really worth the damn are the 2 Cortex ones because they unlock new levels each. But let's say you screw up and fail, which tends to happen. You need to restart the entire level and get all the tokens again. Fun! Again, luckily there are passwords aplenty to remedy this, but I find it baffling that Naughty Dog thought it was okay to have the player jump through hoops just to save the game. Just stick with the passwords, it'll save you a whole lot of pain. So while I did have some negatives that probably pissed someone off, I still do believe that Crash Bandicoot is a really fun platformer and a definite PlayStation classic. I don't think the game is as great as people make it out to be anymore, since it's definitely showed its age, but when I do play it, I still really have a fun time. But without a doubt, the best part about this game was that it did well enough to have Crash be PlayStation's main guy, which led us to some sweet, sweet sequels, which is my clever idea of a segue to...
Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back.
A year later, we retreated to what he just said, Crash 2, Cortex Strikes Back, and man, what a difference a single year can make! Every single thing that the original Crash did, this one did better. Everything. And it is one of the finer ways in how to make a proper video game sequel. So without further ado, let's get into it. Right after Cortex's defeat in the first game, he finds himself falling down a great distance into a dark and mysterious cave with the floating crystal. An idea strikes and a year goes by, and Cortex, along with his new partner N. Jin, decide to find and harness the power of the crystals, but they can't find them alone, and since they have no friends, they decide to get help from an enemy. Back on the surface, Crash is chilling out in the jungle with his sister Coco, and... oh, you know what, that's right. Crash has a sister now, and Tawna is no longer to be found. You got it? Alright, good. Coco whines to her brother to get her a new laptop battery, so Crash ventures out to their house, I guess? But on the way, Crash somehow gets warped into a mysterious warp room with a bunch of gateways. A pretty nifty hologram of Cortex shows up and he gives us the whole spiel on how he's a good guy now and wants Crash to go through all of the levels and get the crystals for him. It would be a bit more of a believable story if the game wasn't titled, I don't know, Cortex Strikes Back? But you may be thinking, whatever happened to Cortex's old right-hand man in Embryo? I can only assume some betrayal happened behind the scenes because he shows up in a hologram form as well, asking Crash to collect the gems to stop Cortex's plan of world domination. What makes the story better implemented than the first game is that throughout the game you'll come in contact with Cortex, Embryo, and even Coco as Cortex becomes more and more open about his true intentions. It makes for a lot better of a story than whoops, fell out of a window, be right back. You'll notice the first major improvement in gameplay within the first few seconds. Crash control is pretty stiff in the first game, but here, smooth as butter. You can use the analog sticks now, but even when using the D-pad, Crash controls so much better, and it's so much easier to get him where you want it to go. It's amazing. The main concept of the game remains the same though. Go from point A to point B safely in straight line levels, just now you need to collect a crystal that's more times than not out in the open. You still have your jump and your infamous spin attack, but now you also have a crawl, ground pound, and a slide which you can use for a slide jump, and having more moves is always a good thing. Gems are collected in the same way as well, by breaking all the crates in the level, but luckily you can die as many times as you want. Thank you. But some levels will have 2 gems in them. A second white gem will have you do certain tasks like racing against a clock, but you'll also see the color gems return as well, opening paths in previous levels like last time, and like the second white gems you need to do special tasks. For example, the blue gem in level 1 you get by going through the whole level without breaking a single crate, and you get the red gem in level 2 by actually going to level 7, finding a warp spot that will bring you to a special warp room with a path back to level 2, which leads you to a path to the gem. It's a little more complicated this time around. Levels will also be littered with bonus room platforms instead of requiring you to collect tokens. Although the idea of a bonus room is still the same, little 2D challenge rooms with more boxes and extra lives, but again, you can die here and not worry about restarting the level. Again, thank you! The only time the game wants you to stay alive is a select few levels where you must get to a skull bonus path without dying. These skull paths can be very difficult at times, but doing them successfully will reward you with another gem. And then there are the bosses, which are a lot better done than they were in the first game and show us some new faces. They're a lot more fun than the ones in the first game with more interesting patterns, all except for the final boss, which you can literally beat in 15 seconds, making it one of the most pathetic final bosses I've ever seen in my life. I'm not even sorry. Basically, to get 100%, it will be difficult, but nowhere near as controller throwing inducing as the first one. So in essence, Crash 2 is an instance of the more things change, the more they stay the same, and I would not have it any other way. Oh, and also, you can finally save whenever you want in the hub world. Thank you! The extra level types return as well. The boulder chases are back, but now with more obstacles to worry about that are in your path, which is perfect to add to the stress of being chased. And one time you even get chased by huge angry polar bears, it's so cool! The animal riding segments are back too, but instead you're riding an adorable little polar bear, and like the boulder levels, they're mostly the same except for more obstacles to deal with, which is totally fine by me. Then within river levels, you'll also find a wave runner to ride, and honestly, can you ever go wrong with riding a wave runner? The last major different type of level is by far the coolest. Rocket pack levels within a space station. The controls do take a little while to get used to here, but come on here, you're riding a rocket pack in a space station. You can get used to the control curve. Unfortunately, there are only 2 of these levels throughout the game, and they're only in the last section of the game. Kind of a bummer, but as I said in Crash 1, levels do repeat. But with the extra handful of different types and changes to the boulder levels, riding levels, and normal levels, it doesn't feel anywhere near as repetitive. Another obvious thing to note is that the themes in the game are a lot more varied. It's still all sort of nature-based, but now there's the jungle, rivers, snowy mountains, ruins, sewers, and of course the space stations, and in general they all look visually better than any of the themes in the first game. Accompanying the different themes is an awesome soundtrack. Crash 1's soundtrack I'd say is just alright, but Crash 2's is awesome. I especially love the snow and river themes, they're just so good. What's also awesome is whenever you go into a skull path, the music suddenly gets a lot more intense, adding to the stress, I guess. Crash 1's soundtrack I can take it or leave it, but I would say this soundtrack is a crucial reason to why this game is awesome. There really is nothing else to say here about Crash 2. Take everything that was good in Crash 1, make it awesome, take everything that wasn't awesome in Crash 1, and forget about it. The story is better by sprinkling in character updates throughout the game, the control is miles better, the variety has been kicked up a good few notches, graphics are a lot more vibrant and smooth, the music is awesome, I don't really have a single complaint except the difficulty can sometimes be a bit too much, but really, can I use that as a legit complaint? Similar to the soundtrack, Crash 1 became a game I could just take it or leave it, but this game, completely awesome. Now, with such an awesome game here, you would think it'd be impossible for a third game to outdo it. It's funny you brought that up.
Crash Bandicoot 4!
Just another year later, and we were treated to, what he said yet again, Crash 3 Warped. Now as a kid, I just played this game and loved it without much thought. But looking at the game now, I am so surprised that they continued to make the series even better. As the last game in the Crash Trilogy, Naughty Dog left us with quite the quality game on our hands. Now let's take a closer look. After the events of Crash 2, Cortex's space station is destroyed and crashes into a mountain, conveniently enough where an evil spirit happens to be resting, thus awakening it. This evil spirit is actually a mask named Uka Uka, Aku Aku's twin brother. Not sure why the game says they're twins, I'm either guessing they're fraternal or Uka Uka went through a weird phase. Uka Uka was apparently behind Cortex's previous plans, and upon his failures recruits new guy Nefarious Trophy and tells Cortex to try again. You can't fail with that sort of logic! Back on Earth, Aku Aku, finally showing some character, senses Uka Uka's emergence, and as Crash and Coco go to the time-twisting machine, which is N-Trophy's creation, and collect the crystals and gems all over again, occasionally getting interrupted by Cortex and his minions similar to the last game. It is another save-the-day scenario, but it's just cool to see how the masks show some character now as these sort of omnipotent beings of sorts. Coco's lost all character though. She didn't say a whole lot in Crash 2, but now she says nothing. Anyway, it's a story that works, so let's go on to the gameplay. As you'd expect, the gameplay is roughly identical from the previous ones. Go from point A to point B, collect crystals, break crates to get gems, along with doing special tasks to get colored or second gems. It's all here. There is one new collectible though in the form of a time relic. While there was no incentive to replay levels in the previous games unless you missed a gem, now once you beat a level you can go through it again to try getting your fastest time. But what's interesting in this mode is that some crates will turn yellow and have numbers on them, and breaking them will freeze the timer for that many seconds, adding a pretty sweet mechanic to a time trial. These relics will unlock levels in a special warp room, while crystals and gems will continue to just push for 100%. Crash controls smooth as butter yet again and has all the same moves, but now when you beat a boss you unlock a new move. A super ground slam, which is pretty nifty, both a double jump and a super spin, which is cool for getting to new paths, a freaking bazooka, which really, bazookas, there can never be a problem when there's a bazooka. And super speed shoes, which make the time trials a lot more interesting since you don't get them until you beat the game, again, adding more replay value. Now as for the level types, holy crap, there are so many! Since the game deals with time travel, there were no limits to what ideas were possible. Normal levels would take place in the medieval days, through Egyptian pyramids, Arabian towns, futuristic cities, and volcanoes where you occasionally get to ride a green dinosaur, which has never ever been done before, ever. The chase levels have you being chased by a triceratops in said volcano levels, and the riding levels have you play as Coco riding her pet tiger on the freaking Great Wall of China, giving Coco a little bit of spotlight time. There are no rocket pack levels here unfortunately, but there are plenty more types to play through. 2D underwater levels, which for being a water level in the platformer does a pretty good job. Rocking a sweet jacket and shades and racing with your motorcycle, which is pretty cool, except for the fact that your opponents are crazy annoying and any contact with them guarantees you won't get first place. It's pretty cheap at times. Probably the craziest are pretty good dogfighting battles, and totally awesome jet ski levels with Coco and intense controller rumbling functionality. Totally my favorite levels in the game. You want to talk about variety, this game just oozes it. And like Crash 2, bosses are quality and challenging, there's not a whole lot to say there. At least the final boss now is epic like Crash 1. You dodge fire from Cortex while the two masks duke it out. It's pretty good stuff. Now graphically, this game looks fantastic. There's no preface, for the time, or for the PlayStation. Nah, this game just outright looks fantastic. All the levels are very cartoony and vibrant, making them just stand out even more, and the backgrounds play a big part of this as they add a good sense of immersion. Like in the medieval levels, you see a castle in the distance that you're essentially making your way towards, and the end of the level is at the gate of the castle. And the only way that I know that the future levels take place in a city is because you see lit up buildings all around you. The game is a treat to the eyes. Music-wise, I wouldn't say the soundtrack is as good as Crash 2, but the songs are definitely awesome and fit all the levels' themes, so I would say it's definitely better than Crash 1. And honestly, I think the theme song / warp room music is way too catchy for its own good. It won't leave your head. And with that, that wraps up the Crash Bandicoot Trilogy. Crash 1 may have its flaws, but I would definitely say it's still a PlayStation classic, and Crash 2 and 3 hold up fantastically today. Both 2 and 3 are games I'm constantly back and forthing between on which I prefer because both games are awesome. But I obviously do recommend playing through all these games if you can get over the few flaws of the first one. And unlike Spyro, Crash continued to do pretty well after the trilogy. An awesome racing game with Crash Team Racing, a pretty good party game with Bash, 2D GBA games that are really faithful to the Crash formula, an alright sequel with Wrath of Cortex, a total gameplay shift with Twinsanity, and then things just got totally weird with Titans and Mind Over Mutant. But maybe one day I'll go into these too. One thing's for certain though, none of those following games come close to the coolness of the original Crash trilogy. So thank you, you orange marsupial. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review, and as always, I will catch you all next time.